it's very important that digital native is not defined as just a nice user experience or beautiful interface. It's defined in the way that you think about every business decision, how you're using data to make decisioning, how you are using data to hire people, how you are in every stage of the business or the life cycle. That to me is a true digital native rather than somebody who's just put a great UX or UI in a mobile app and are calling themselves digitally native. So for me, making sure that we don't conflate the term digital native with great UX, great UI, that's not what being digital native means. So one of the issues that often ends up happening with traditional enterprises is in this quest to be digitally native, they will then overspend on getting a great interface without having made a conscious decision about what else in their workflows needs to have become digital. And only when you have this end-to-end workflow being digitally native can you really call yourself a digital native.
So it's fundamentally reimagining, not putting a lipstick on it.
Yeah,
wrapper on
your
it.
words, not mine, but yes.
Yes. But I think the other thing also, if you look at companies like Uber, Airbnb and so on, they've also fundamentally looked at an asset-light model, not heavy balance sheet. And I know, Nneka, that we were talking about, especially in financial services, you guys have come up with several products very quickly. So you want to talk about that a little bit and share your experience there?
Yes, definitely. Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. So, leading financial innovation at Better, when I think about embracing disruption, it's something that's really near and dear and core to what I do. The company is a digital lender, it's a fintech, but it recently crossed the threshold of $100 billion in funded volume. And to my knowledge, we are the only independently owned fintech that's done that volume. And the company is only 7 years old. It would be very easy for us to rest on our laurels and say, look at what we've built, look at what we've done, it's working. Let's just keep on doing this exact same thing over and over again. But because we are truly digitally native, to Simran's point, we're constantly trying to find ways to disrupt ourselves and to disrupt our competitors. And what that looks like is us being very lean in terms of how we deploy resources to investigate new potential products and services. So we take a lean startup approach. You can even think about it as a startup within a startup. We have small pods of people who are able to work cross-functionally to design and prototype and pilot new financial products and new financial services. And doing it that way enables us to deploy these solutions very, very quickly. So a really good example is, even after we crossed the threshold of $100 billion in funded volume, we said, what else can we do to delight our customers? We ended up launching a one-day mortgage in January. And we could have easily not done that and worked on the thing that's already working, but we had a thesis and we wanted to test it. And during that first month, a lot of people said it was a gimmick and that, folks would not be interested in a one-day mortgage. But our bet is that people are interested in speed and certainty. And in that first month, we did about $5 million in funded loan commitments. That second month, the number jumped to $158 million. That third month, the number jumped to $316 million, I want to say. And then this past month, April, we were around $620 million. And that's just one product. And so when you think about being digitally native, I like to think about it in terms of investing in disrupting yourself so that you are not disrupted.
Thanks, Nneka. Richard, you want to add your perspectives, looking again both from your current vantage point at Amazon, but also previously having started your own firm?
Yeah, I've had the privilege of starting my own company, then working at a Fortune 50 company as one of their entrepreneurs in residence, and now finally being able to work at Amazon, where really, my co-founder and I, even since the early days when we started our business, we were thinking about which companies to model our culture behind. And Amazon was one of those companies where we really thought, how do they go and do this? How do they become this giant behemoth and yet still continue to innovate? And as I kind of think about what are the differences between what we did when we were a 5-person startup that finally got a little bit of money, to how we were looking to innovate at our Fortune 50 acquirer, to now how I'm operating at Amazon, I think it really came down to 2 different things. And the first one is how and what is the decision-making process in which you're deploying resources. And resources can be time, with the people that you have, or the money that you have. We like to say, before the acquisition, it was, we have a lot of time, but we have no money. After the acquisition with ABI, we had a short amount of time, but we had almost an infinite amount of money. So the trade-off decisions you got to make are really, really different. So the first piece, how are those decisions actually being made? And then the second piece is, what happens after you run an experiment, right? It's great to hear about all the successes and wins that we've always had, but then what actually happens to people within an organization if they fail? And when we're at a startup, there are 3 people, you have a conversation, you make a decision, everyone runs. You're also in a startup, it's very clear that things are uncertain, so if it doesn't work in the next team meeting, okay, cool, let's kill that and let's go do something else. Really, really easy for startups to go make that happen. Post-acquisition, and then now that I'm at Amazon, I've seen large enterprises do it in a very, very different kind of way. And I think, you're still able to make the conscious decision to run your P&L, to think about your annual planning in a certain kind of way. That's how you need to allocate resources once you get to a large enough size of an organization. But I think the area that Amazon does things, where Amazon does things really, really well, and that's the reason why they can continue to innovate, is because we don't necessarily look at each of our hypotheses and the hypothesis tests that individuals are running as the definition of whether or not this person is successful in their career. And that does a few things. One of which, it allows us to take learnings back from all of the potential failures. No one knows about the Fire Phone anymore, but that turned into Alexa. So what that allows us to do is to say, okay, we are going to look at how people think about a problem, go attempt to do really big, interesting, hairy, challenging things. And even if they fail, we're looking at what the learnings are. We can take that team and that set of resources that we've already invested to go and build something, and to build on top of that, and to build something better. Whereas I've seen in other organizations that's not the case. And that's where I think the big challenge in culture starts to reframe itself. And I think the assumption is that enterprises are full of red tape and there's a whole lot of politics. But if you really think deep into what that manifests itself into, it is, how are people promoted? What kind of cycle are they thinking on? Is it a year, several years, and how that works? So, I think Amazon's done it really, really well because they've aligned incentives and they've aligned people to going out and solving problems, taking those learnings, regardless of if they're successful or not, back to the organization, and the rest of the organization embraces all of that to continue to innovate and to move forward.
Yeah, I think that's quite interesting because it's really all about that mindset and the culture and how do you put in incentives to innovate. Right? So, Vish, over the years, you've seen several hundreds of startups. You've also helped them collaborate with enterprises. You want to tie this together for us in terms of what mindset you see?
Certainly, thank you. Thank you very much. Delighted to be here and opportunity to speak to such an elite set of audience over here, the way you described who they are. So, yes, as you heard earlier, Akshay mentioned, my career started way back when, with the master's in electrical engineering, and I started my career with the mainframe computers, and not just the mainframe, but the supercomputers. So actually, in a way, now that we think about the disruptors, my company, Control Data, was a disruptor. because IBM was the one, the dominant player, we call IBM and the bunch, and they had 85% of the market, and the rest of us had like 15%. But with the new innovation that came about in supercomputing, so that was the initial disruption. And the young age, I recall very clearly, I joined the company, I was 22 years old, and I got promoted into management like 3 years later, like I was 25. And the average age of that company was 29 years. And then after that transition, I got recruited away by another company, Burroughs Corporation. I moved to Michigan. And Burroughs was kind of old-fashioned company. They made ABCs, adding machines, bookkeeping machines, and calculating machines. That was called, they made ABCs. And average age of a Burroughs employee, believe it or not, was 58 years old, twice as much. Because they were so rooted into tradition, and they hired me, recruited me away from Control Data because the company said they want some new blood. So, and I think, as I see right now, okay, we're talking about the digital transformation, that's what's happening. You have to get some new blood because I know you guys all have, at least some of you who are into traditional industries, you've built amazing businesses, stuff like that. So how do you blend try to get the new blood and still keep the old knowledge? Because the new blood comes in and they will say, okay, well, I can fix this thing, you can do that. So they can't just go and disrupt things just like that. Because and I've seen this thing, industry has gone and recruited people from the tech sector, and they come over here, mortality rate is so high. They stay in 2 jobs in 2 years. So chief digital officer, chief transformation officer, chief innovation officer, you name a chief of this and that. It's like some of the titles are just meaningless. But they really have to, so my advice to these people have been listen, or the people who recruited them, because if you don't understand the fundamental business, how can you transform it? If you don't understand the fundamental business, how can you govern it? So that is very, very key. So you have to understand what they're doing for the last 50 years or 60 years or 100 years, and what can you bring to the table. So you have to understand, if you understand that, then you can indeed transform. So one of the things that, we can talk about digital natives, so I hope that ChatGPT is the biggest gift for the digital natives, okay? At least now they can write better. Because I get messages I get email from people, young people, oh gosh, text messages. I can't comprehend what they're telling me. But that's the kind of thing that just kind of goes on, okay? So if you have those kind of people in your company, tell them to please, at least use ChatGPT to write your sentences.
So the latest, I think they're training ChatGPT on the emojis and the language of digital.
I know exactly, but also besides writing, so at least maybe also speaking also is equally important, okay? Because you start speaking, they're speaking in like, Morse code, or the old days like, telegram. What are you talking about, okay? So, but just kidding aside, but I think they know that they really bring a lot to the table because they are all born. And I think the other thing to also remember is that, especially for the future now, because I've been in computer industry for 50 years, and I've kept up with all the changes. So from the mainframes to going back to the mini computers, to the client-server computing, then to the internet, and the whole thing that you see, all the evolutions, I've seen it. And maybe I'm so happy that I don't read books, I don't have time, but I hang out with a lot of young people. So that's how I pick up all the knowledge, because the fundamental knowledge really hasn't changed. If you really have if you're deeply rooted into whatever subject you studied, they just don't change. But so a lot of people get intimidated. Oh gosh, they know so much and I don't know. No, please do not be afraid, okay? If you don't understand, they're talking about, would you please explain to me in simple terms, okay? What do they really mean, for me, for my business? And you'll be surprised and they will, you'll understand it. So anyway, those are some of the observations I just want to make.
No, yeah, absolutely. I think some of those are timeless lessons in terms of how to operate, how to run businesses and so on. But again, I think switching gears a little bit, the enterprises, they're obviously very keen to innovate, reinvent, and there's a lot of successful examples. And maybe want to switch tracks a little bit to see, what advice, one from a digital native perspective, and then also how to collaborate collaborate or put in structures. So one of the things that at least when we work with some heavily regulated sectors like fintech, financial services, or healthcare, one of the barriers that the larger corporation would have is, well, they can do it because they don't care about security or privacy and so on. So I mean, you have a lot of background in law. What advice would you have for enterprises in terms of when that objection comes in?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think about it in terms of what I call regulatory entrepreneurship. And we saw a really good example of it with Uber, right? If Uber had sought regulatory approval before flooding the market, they would have probably failed to launch. And so when I was in big law and working with corporations and helping them figure out how to survive regulatory challenges, a big component of that was helping them understand what jurisdictions are business friendly, what circuits they can build in, and also how to build the product in a way that survives a regulatory challenge. So I think it's important, first of all, to keep it at the forefront. I know that some enterprises think that digital natives are just throwing caution to the wind. The smarter way to think about it is taking all of those risks into account up front and building in a way that you can actually mitigate a lot of that risk up front. The other thing I will say is that from a digital native perspective, we are boundary pushing and execution driven. We value speed over perfection. And I think a lot of times in enterprises, you want to get it exactly right. We view it as an opportunity to iterate. To Richard's earlier point, fail early and often, and take those lessons and learnings and build something even better. And we actually just built something in collaboration with Amazon called an equity unlocker. It's an illiquid asset-backed mortgage, brand new, it's maybe a month old. And when we first started talking about what we could potentially collaborate on, we were told to not expect anything to get to market before 2 to 3 years. And I said, hold my beer. And less than a year later, we had this amazing product, approvals on both sides, and we were able to get it to market because as companies, we were spiritually aligned on, first of all, customer obsession, secondly, execution, and we have a lot of similar values. So those are just a couple of the lessons I think enterprises can take from digital natives.
So for example, Green Dot, we offer banking as a service to Amazon, Uber, Intuit, Apple, Walmart. And Walmart's a classic example, right? 200 million people shop at a Walmart any given year. Do you think they can't build financial services on their own? Yes, they can. Do you think they can't go and buy out a financial services company that can offer these services? Yes, they can. But for them, the ability to partner with someone, the ability to then see what works, what doesn't work, at someone else's risk, and so to say, was the right way forward. And that's why I wanted to encourage everyone that don't think that you can buy innovation. A lot of companies will say, hey, we have a large balance sheet, we feel stuck. The right way for us to do is go buy some digitally native company and all our problems will go away with the silver bullet. It's no silver bullet.
Richard, I'm sure you have a perspective on this. Agree, disagree?
This is recorded, right? No, I definitely agree. And that's kind of what we do at AWS. We actually, the program that Nneka was talking about, executive visioning, we have learned through the years as we've worked with startups who've grown into digital native businesses and those digital native businesses who have then moved on to become enterprises. We've learned from many and most of those engagements. And I think AWS has a unique model where we only make money if the customer continues to use the product, right? We're not selling cloud services, we don't sell licenses. It's not like you're committed to 5 years of something and whatever you do, you get the cash. So actually we're in a unique position where we need our customers to build the right things for their customers. Their customer, their stakeholder, whatever they're investing the time and effort to go build, especially if they're using AWS services, it kind of has to be right for them and solves that business problem, because otherwise you're not going to use it again. So the way that we generally operate with our customers is we try to make sure that they are thinking appropriately with all the different ways that they can actually solve that problem. And that's why Nneka said that most of the companies we work with in that program take a couple of years, because most of it is actually culture change, right? As you think about what a startup does well and what a digital native business into an enterprise, like what is that big change? Is it because the company got more successful? Kind of, but it's usually because the company is starting to get really, really big. And then as you get really large, you have to put more controls into place. And whether or not a scale up as they get into the enterprise level, whether or not they continue to have that startup type of mentality that allows them to keep growing or not, I think mostly has to do with culture. So, like Simran said, if you can go partner with a company to identify which area is critical that your business needs to go solve, right? What is the secret sauce for you that you need to keep your team working on and innovating on? And then, what are the things that are just undifferentiated heavy lifting, is what the way we think about it. Maybe those services are the areas where you can go partner with another company, see what kind of innovations are happening there, and take that and bring that back into your own organization. I think with the Anheuser-Busch, they really understood how to take brands and put them onto shelves. What they didn't have any real understanding of was how do I extract data from people who are selling those products. So they had to go make a decision. Do I buy? Do I build? Do I partner? And if you want to hear more about that, go find me at the bar later.
It's a great source.
Yeah. Vish, does partnering work? What lessons?
Definitely. I think, over the years I've seen there is no such thing as one size fits all. So it's very easy to put them in the pockets, okay? I'll do it myself, okay? Or I'll buy from somebody, or maybe I'll partner. But the idea that you all have to take a look at your own business situation independently. It just does not work. I will give you examples of successful companies that have been built over the years just by buying. Consumer goods company, Procter & Gamble. You'll be surprised how many companies they acquired because they couldn't innovate. They had brands that were doing so well, but they just couldn't get into adjacent markets. So they went and bought the startups. So all the products that you see in Procter & Gamble, they don't have, they put Procter & Gamble just tiny little letter, but they use the same brand. They didn't kill the brand because they products were very popular. Cisco is a good example. I know it's a Silicon Valley company started 40 years ago, same time, my company started. And they grew through acquisition. Cisco acquired 180 companies, when John Chambers was CEO. And they continue to grow, continue to build. So we have examples galore of these kind of stuff, whether even in the industrial space. Companies started and they kept on also acquiring. But yes, there is a need for partner. Partner bring the expertise, and sometimes they can be independent, but sometimes they also go native. So that's when the partnership does not work, because partnership doesn't give you honest, independent opinion. They want to now, sell you, what you really prefer to buy and what you, or tell you what you love to hear. Okay. And that's also the risk there too, that, okay, so you have to be, so innovation has to be driven from you. You have to make a decision as a company. Yeah, we've been around 50 years, very successful. Okay, what do we do here? And by the way, I've given many examples I see happening already. People are setting their own independent innovation labs within the company. And tell them, okay, listen, you're not going to operate just like the rest of the company does. We'll set you aside, give you some money, 50 people, 30 people, go incubate, okay? Just, try and fail, try again. So this is also the trend. So you guys should take a look at that. So you bring some own resident, innovator. Okay, yeah.
Actually on that, Richard and I were having that chat, which I found very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Can you do large enterprises by their nature and design? They will need to have annual operating plans and cycles and so on. And that was, I thought, was very interesting. Can you really do innovation on an annual operating plan? So.
Oh yeah, even the business schools, by the way, they've started now teaching. Go to MBA class, they're teaching people rapid prototyping. They're having executive session, Harvard, Stanford, Kellogg, all these groups. They're doing the execs from traditional industry. You come there for 60 days or 4 weeks, and they will teach you because you can sort of divorce yourself from the older habits that you have or older processes, because all the large companies, they just process for everything. Okay, and that's also the kind of killer. Okay, so you can say, listen, that process was established like 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Problem was different. Problem has gone away, but the process still lives. And that's the other thing that my advice to a lot of people is that please really take a look at the process. Does the process still make sense that you have put in place?
Precisely.
So,
No, thanks. So I know, I think we could go on and on. I mean,
Yeah.
but the clock is running. But so 60 seconds. Maybe starting with you, Richard. What piece of advice would you have for executives, as they go about driving innovation in their organizations, for their clients, for their partners? So starting with you, and then maybe the rest of the panel.
Yeah, I think, thinking about what are the incentives and motivations that are put in place for the senior executives and their teams will give you a sense of where your company is at on the fear and excitement stage or scale. I think, many times at the beginning of a project, there's a lot of excitement, and at the beginning of innovation, lots of excitement, a little bit of fear. As the project progresses and you start learning about what you're doing and what you don't know, the unknown unknowns, there's a lot more fear. And then the first time there's a giant hiccup, some KPI you weren't able to meet, some deadline you weren't able to meet, there's a lot of fear and there's very little innovation. I think for the digital native businesses and the startups, they don't really have the giant balance sheet of the other business to fall back to. So you just have to push through the fear and you continue to innovate. But where I see enterprises maybe fail in this endeavor is once that first wave of fear hits, the innovation kind of goes away, and they just said, you know what, this didn't work, we're not an innovative company. And I would endeavor you to think differently. No one wakes up and says, I bet you everyone in your organization, no one's waking up and saying, I wish I don't have to, I wish our company stayed still and didn't do anything. Like, no one's thinking that way. But there are other things and other constraints that are in place that's forcing your teams to think in a certain way. So how can you push through that fear, continue to innovate, and help them through that? Because there are big problems that only your teams are there to really, truly understand, to Raj's point, right? Pull that out from them and empower them and enable them to think big, to learn from their mistakes, and then to take that to build something even better for the rest of your organizations.